What happens when a beloved actor decides to speak truth to power on live television, only to have the host try to silence him? What happens when that same host, known for his carefully crafted public persona, reveals his true colors when the cameras are rolling? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history, a moment that left audiences stunned and questioning everything they thought they knew about Jimmy Kimmel. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really went down that night. It was supposed to be a routine appearance. Aaron Paul, the Emmy-winning actor known for his role as Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad, was scheduled to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote his latest project. The show's producers had briefed both men on the talking points, the usual softball, questions about his new work, maybe some light-hearted banter about his family, and of course, the obligatory Breaking Bad references that audiences always expected. But from the moment Aaron walked onto that stage, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that even the studio audience could sense. Jimmy's usual warm welcome seemed forced, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he shook Aaron's hand and gestured for him to take a seat on the iconic couch. "Aaron Paul, everybody," Jimmy announced to the applause of the audience, but his voice carried an edge that regular viewers might have missed. "Great to have you back on the show." Aaron settled into his seat, adjusting his jacket with a nervous energy that was uncharacteristic for someone who had done hundreds of interviews over the years. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Though I have to say, after what happened in the green room, I wasn't sure if I'd actually make it out here." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Jimmy's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of something dark crossing his features before he recovered with a laugh that sounded hollow through the studio speakers. "Oh, you know how it is backstage," Jimmy deflected, waving a dismissive hand. "Lots of moving parts, lots of people trying to do their jobs. Sometimes wires get crossed." But Aaron wasn't backing down. He leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying that intensity that had made Jesse Pinkman such a compelling character. "Wires get crossed? Is that what we're calling it when your producers try to change an actor's entire interview 5 minutes before showtime?" The studio audience, sensing drama, fell into an expectant silence. This wasn't the usual late-night banter they had come to expect. This felt real, raw, unscripted in a way that modern television rarely allowed. Jimmy's laugh became more strained, his hands fidgeting with the index cards on his desk. "Aaron, I think maybe we should focus on why you're here tonight. Your new project sounds fascinating." "My new project," Aaron repeated, his voice taking on a sardonic tone. "Right. The project that your team decided wasn't worth talking about anymore. The project that apparently got bumped so we could spend more time on some prepared bit about my supposed drinking problem." The accusation hit the studio like a thunderbolt. Jimmy's face went pale, then flushed red as he realized that Aaron was not going to play along with whatever script had been prepared. The host's famous composure began to crack, revealing something uglier underneath. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jimmy said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We would never suggest something like that without good reason." "Good reason?" Aaron's voice rose slightly, carrying across the silent studio. "What good reason could you possibly have for ambushing a guest with false accusations? What good reason could you have for trying to humiliate someone who trusted you enough to come on your show?" Jimmy's mask was slipping now, his true personality bleeding through the carefully constructed television persona. "Look, Aaron, this is my show. I've been doing this for years, and I know what makes good television. Sometimes that means asking the hard questions that other hosts won't ask." "Hard questions?" Aaron laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jimmy, there's a difference between hard questions and character assassination. There's a difference between journalism and ambush tactics designed to create viral moments at someone else's expense." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Camera operators were glancing at each other uncertainly, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing something they had never seen before on late-night television. Jimmy's voice dropped lower, taking on a menacing quality that his viewers had never heard before. "You know what, Aaron? Maybe you should be grateful that anyone still wants to book you on their show. It's not like you've been setting the world on fire lately." The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to wound. But if Jimmy thought it would silence Aaron, he had badly miscalculated. Instead of backing down, Aaron's eyes flashed. With anger and something else, a determination to expose the truth regardless of the consequences. "There it is," Aaron said, his voice steady despite the fury burning in his eyes. "There's the real Jimmy Kimmel, not the lovable everyman you play on television, but the petty, vindictive person who uses his platform to tear people down when they don't dance to your tune." Jimmy's composure finally shattered completely. "How dare you?" he hissed, leaning forward in his chair. "How dare you come on my show and attack me? I could have any guest I want sitting in that chair. I don't need you." "Then why did you book me?" Aaron shot back. "Why did you specifically request this interview if you didn't need me? Could it be because your ratings have been slipping? Could it be because people are starting to see through the act?" The accusation struck home. Jimmy's face contorted with rage, his carefully maintained public image crumbling in real time as millions of viewers watched. The man who had built his career on being the affable host, the guy next door who just happened to have a talk show, was revealing himself to be something far more calculating and cruel. The studio fell into an eerie quiet, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Jimmy's face was flushed with anger, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. For a moment it seemed like he might actually lunge across the space between them. "You want to talk about ratings?" Jimmy's voice was low and venomous now, all pretense of television friendliness abandoned. "Let's talk about your career trajectory, Aaron. Let's talk about how you've been desperately clinging to Breaking Bad's coattails for over a decade." Aaron didn't flinch. If anything, Jimmy's personal attack seemed to strengthen his resolve. "At least I'm not built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. At least when people see me on screen, they're seeing something real." "Real?" Jimmy laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You're an actor, Aaron. Nothing about you is real. You pretend to be other people for a living, and now you want to lecture me about authenticity? There's a difference between playing a character and being one," Aaron replied, his voice cutting through Jimmy's attempt at deflection. "When the cameras stop rolling, I'm still the same person. Can you say the same thing?" Jimmy's producer, visible in Aaron's peripheral vision, was making frantic hand gestures, clearly trying to signal for a commercial break. But Jimmy ignored him completely, too caught up in his rage to think strategically. "You know what your problem is, Aaron?" Jimmy leaned back in his chair, his expression turning cold and calculating. "You think because you played one iconic role, you're somehow above the game. You think you can come on my show and dictate terms?" "I think I can come on your show and expect basic human decency," Aaron responded. "I think I can expect not to be ambushed with fabricated stories designed to make me look bad for your entertainment." "Fabricated?" Jimmy's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "That's interesting. So you're saying the sources who reached out to our producers were lying? You're saying there's no truth to any of it?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "I'm saying that even if there were truth to it, which there isn't, a responsible host would verify information before blindsiding a guest on live television. A decent human being would have the conversation privately first." "A decent human being," Jimmy repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's rich coming from someone who's had his own issues with temperament on set. Should we talk about some of those stories, Aaron?" The threat was clear, and it finally pushed Aaron past his breaking point. He stood up from the couch, his movement sudden enough that the audience gasped audibly. "You know what, Jimmy? This is exactly why your show is failing. This is exactly why people are turning away from late-night television. Because instead of actual conversation, instead of genuine connection, You offer manufactured drama and cheap shots. Jimmy stood as well, the two men now facing each other across the coffee table like gunslingers in an old western. My show is failing? We're still here after 20 years. Where will you be in 20 years, Aaron? Hopefully somewhere far away from people like you, Aaron shot back. People who use their platform to tear others down instead of building them up. People who hide behind fake smiles while they plot character assassinations. Character assassination? Jimmy's voice rose to nearly a shout. You came on my show. You agreed to be here. If you can't handle a real interview, maybe you should stick to the softball questions on the morning shows. A real interview? Aaron's laugh was incredulous. Jimmy, what you're doing isn't journalism. It's not even entertainment. It's just cruelty dressed up in a suit and tie. The accusation seemed to hit Jimmy like a physical blow. His face contorted, with rage, and for a moment, the mask slipped so completely that everyone in the studio could see the petty, vindictive person lurking beneath the television persona. Get him out of here! Jimmy suddenly barked to his security team, his voice cracking with emotion. Get him off my stage right now! Aaron looked around at the approaching security guards, then back at Jimmy with something that might have been pity. You know what the saddest part is, Jimmy? I actually used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones. I don't need your respect, Jimmy spat. I don't need anything from you. Security. But Aaron wasn't done. Even as the security guards moved closer, he continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned studio. You had a choice tonight, Jimmy. You could have been the bigger person. You could have had a real conversation about real issues. Instead, you chose to be petty and vindictive. I chose to be honest, Jimmy retorted. Something you clearly have a problem with. Honest? Aaron shook his head sadly. Jimmy, you wouldn't know honesty if it slapped you in the face. You've been playing a character so long that you've forgotten who you really are underneath. The security guards were almost within reach now, but Jimmy held up a hand to stop them. Something in Aaron's words had struck home, and despite his anger, he seemed compelled to respond. At least I know who I am, Jimmy said, his voice quieter but no less venomous. I'm not some washed-up actor desperately trying to stay relevant by picking fights on talk shows. Washed up? Aaron's eyebrows rose. Is that really the best you can do, Jimmy? After all these years in the business, after all the comedy writers on your payroll, the best insult you can come up with is calling me washed up? Jimmy's face flushed deeper. How about this then? You're a one-trick pony who got lucky with one role and has been coasting on it ever since. You're a mediocre actor who thinks he's more important than he actually is. And you're a failed comedian who lucked into a hosting gig, Aaron replied without missing a beat. The difference is, I'm not trying to destroy other people to make myself feel better about my limitations. The exchange was brutal in its honesty. Two men stripping away years of professional politeness to reveal the raw emotions underneath. The studio audience sat in shocked silence, witnessing something that felt more like a gladiatorial combat than a television interview. Jimmy's chest was heaving with barely controlled rage, his usual composure completely shattered. The man who had spent decades crafting the perfect television personality was now exposed as something far more sinister, and he seemed to realize that his career might be hanging in the balance. You think you're so noble, don't you? Jimmy's voice was shaking now, whether from anger or fear it was impossible to tell. You think you're taking some kind of moral stand here? Aaron looked at him with what could only be described as disappointment. I think I'm standing up to a bully who's been hiding behind a fake smile for too long. I think I'm doing what someone should have done years ago. A bully? Jimmy's laugh was hysterical now, bordering on unhinged. I'm the bully? You're the one who came on my show and started attacking me unprovoked. Unprovoked? Aaron's voice rose in disbelief. Jimmy, you literally tried to ambush me with false accusations about my personal life. You tried to humiliate me on live television for your own entertainment. How is defending myself an unprovoked attack? The studio audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats now, some beginning to whisper among themselves. This had gone far beyond entertainment into something that felt genuinely disturbing. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of Jimmy's public breakdown. "You know what?" Jimmy suddenly turned to address the audience directly, his voice taking on a manic quality. "This is what happens when you try to do real journalism, folks. When you try to ask the hard questions, the celebrities throw tantrums and accuse you of being a bully." Aaron stared at him in amazement. "Real journalism? Jimmy, you're a late-night comedy host. You tell jokes between celebrity interviews. When did you decide you were Edward R. Murrow?" "I'm more of a journalist than you are an actor," Jimmy shot back, his desperation becoming more apparent with each word. "At least I'm not living in the past, trading on one role I played over a decade ago." "You're right about one thing," Aaron said, his voice becoming eerily calm. "You are living in the present, and in the present, you're showing millions of people exactly who you really are. How does it feel, Jimmy? How does it feel to know that your mask has finally slipped?" Jimmy's face went through a series of expressions, rage giving way to something that looked almost like panic. He seemed to suddenly realize the magnitude of what was happening, the fact that his carefully constructed public image was crumbling in real time. "Cut to commercial," he barked at his director, but his voice cracked on the words. "Cut to commercial right now." But Aaron wasn't finished. "You can cut to commercial, Jimmy, but you can't cut away from the truth. You can't edit out what just happened here. People saw the real you tonight." "The real me?" Jimmy's voice was becoming more shrill by the second. "The real me is someone who's been entertaining people for decades while you've been doing what? Appearing in forgettable movies and riding Breaking Bad's coattails? The real you," Aaron continued, ignoring the insult, "is someone who uses his platform to hurt people. Someone who thinks power gives him the right to humiliate others for sport. Someone who's forgotten that there are actual human beings behind the celebrity facades." Jimmy seemed to realize that he was losing control of the narrative completely. His eyes darted around the studio, taking in the horrified faces of his staff, the uncomfortable shifting of the audience, the rolling cameras that were capturing his complete meltdown. "Security!" he screamed, his voice breaking completely. "Get him out of here now. This is my show. This is my stage." The security guards finally moved in, but Aaron held up his hands peacefully. "It's okay," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the studio. "I'll leave. I've said what I came to say." "You came to say?" Jimmy's voice was incredulous. "You came here to promote your little project, and instead you decided to destroy my show." Aaron looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Jimmy, I didn't destroy your show. You did that all by yourself. I just gave you enough rope." As the security guards flanked him, Aaron turned to address the studio audience one final time. "I want to apologize to all of you for what you had to witness tonight. You came here for entertainment, and instead you got a front-row seat to someone's complete moral collapse." "Don't you dare!" Jimmy snarled, pointing an accusatory finger at Aaron. "Don't you dare try to play the victim here. You're the one who turned this into a circus." "I'm not playing anything, Jimmy," Aaron replied quietly. "I'm just being myself. Something you might want to try sometime." Jimmy's face contorted with rage one final time. "Get out! Get out of my studio! You're banned. You hear me? Banned for life." Aaron nodded to the security guards and began walking toward the exit, but he paused at the edge of the stage. "You know what the really tragic part is, Jimmy? You used to be funny. You used to bring joy to people. When did you become so angry? When did you become so cruel?" "I became realistic," Jimmy spat. "I learned that nice guys finish last in this business. I learned that you have to fight for what's yours." "No," Aaron shook his head sadly. "You learned to mistake cruelty for strength. You learned to confuse bullying with power. And tonight, millions of people learned the same thing about you." With that, Aaron Paul walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage for the last time, leaving behind a host whose career would never be the same. The cameras continued to roll as Jimmy stood alone on his stage, his chest heaving, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud or simply leave. They had witnessed something unprecedented in the history of late-night television, a complete breakdown of the carefully constructed boundaries between public persona and private character. Jimmy looked around at the sea of shocked faces, at his staff who were staring at him with expressions ranging from horror to disappointment, at the cameras that had captured every moment of his public humiliation. For the first time in his career, Jimmy Kimmel was completely speechless. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the soft whir of the cameras and the uncomfortable shifting of the audience. Jimmy's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The man who had built his career on always having the last word had finally been rendered mute. And in that silence, in that moment of complete vulnerability, viewers at home got their clearest look yet at the real Jimmy Kimmel, stripped of his jokes, his prepared remarks, and his carefully crafted persona. What they saw was a man who had lost not just an argument, but his entire sense of self. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. In the span of 20 minutes, Jimmy Kimmel had gone from beloved late-night host to something else entirely, and there would be no going back. So what do you think really happened behind the scenes that night? Was this a calculated move by Aaron Paul, or was it genuine outrage at being ambushed? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain on Hollywood's biggest moments.